Okay, hey y'all. So I'm gonna start right now about the human anatomy, and for this workshop, oh yeah, I guess I should introduce myself. Hi guys, I'm Kat, and I will be teaching the anatomy workshop today. So this part, there's gonna be a lot of info to go through, so we're gonna try and see how much we can get through in an hour, if that's okay. Okay, so for basic outline of what we're going to talk about for the human anatomy, I'm going to talk about proportions, starting with the head and then body, and then some basic gestures and forms and constructions, and then some additional resources for y'all to go through after this workshop. Okay, so a bit of a disclaimer. For those of y'all who were suspecting this workshop to be more specific about muscles or bones, we don't have time for that. That'll take maybe 8 to 10 hours. So this is just going to be more of a quick introduction about just anatomy. And then additionally, when I'm going over about proportions, this is more of a general guideline of like how like an average human being will be. Everyone's very different, so proportions might vary, but it should be at least around these general guidelines. Okay, any questions? Okay, cool. So then we're going to start off with head proportions. So there's the basic human head. Okay, so now for the human head, I would recommend just drawing like a basic structure right here. So kind of like an egg shape basically for the human head. Okay, and then so for the proportions, about halfway of the human head is about the eyes. So the eyes would be around like halfway between the face, okay? And then, so that's where the eyes are, and just a quick general tip about the width of the eye. The width of the head is about 5 eyes, as you can see by this weird, creepy picture. Yeah, so that's about where the eye line is, okay? And then next part, this one's a little tricky. If you ignore this top part, and you split this section right here into thirds. That will be our next general guidelines for like the eyebrows and the bottom of the nose. Yeah. Oh yeah, feel free to say if I'm going by this too fast. There is a lot of info, and if you guys need a little bit more help or let me reiterate something, just tell me. Yeah. So about generally these 1/3 guidelines is where the nose and the eyebrows are. Okay. And then next part, if you split this section right here from the bottom of the nose to the chin, you split that in 1/3, that's where you can get basically where the chin is. And then this part, this bottom 1/3 here is where the chin is. And then these 2/3 on the top right here is where you get the dentral kind of muscles area. That's like generally where all the little muscles and the lips are. Okay, so like right here you have like kind of all little bits of muscles that are like moving all your lips and getting you to be able to talk and make expressions. Yeah, so that's where, yeah, can't really see it because of these green lines, but yeah, generally right here, this right here is where like that lip line you see, that little opening where it is. And then for like the bottom of the lip and the top of the lip, you can kind of generalize it to be somewhere around like maybe halfway or a little bit more. There's not really much specific like data I can find on it, but just general eyeballing should be good enough, especially since a lot of people's lips are very different shapes and sizes. Yeah. Okay. So now when we got that, next is for the ears, and this always surprises people, but the top of your ears, the little top right here, not where it connects to your head, but the very top, is about right around where your eyebrow is. And then the bottom of the ears is where the bottom of your nose is. Yeah, so that always surprises people by how big their ears are, but yeah, surprisingly they are. Yeah, and generally it's mainly because when you talk to people, when you see people, you don't really look at them straight on. So that might be why it always shocks people. Yeah. And then after that, just basic like redefining it. And then you have your basic kind of proportions. And then, oh, something I forgot to mention, when you're trying to draw the side view, right? So the side view, so the side view, you can kind of think of it as like, kind of like two kind of egg shapes kind of together. So like, you know, you guys know how this kind of seems like an egg, I guess, kind of, or an oval. So basically you take that oval, put it here, and then you take that oval and put it sideways there. Right, so you can see technically there's like two ovals here, and then you split this kind of in half. So that's where you can get like, that's where you can get where the jaw connects and where the ears connect. And then for like all the features, it kind of ends around generally about halfway in here. Okay. And then some more stuff about alignment. Alignment, basically, the midpoint of your eyes, it aligns about the end of your lips. Okay. And then the edges of your nose, it basically aligns with where the start of your eyes are. And yeah, you can see this here again on the side.
That's his tears drop down his face.
Yeah. 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 And then this is just a slide to reiterate. A lot of people, as you can tell, everyone's face is always slightly different. And obviously no one follows these proportions measurements exactly to the T. Generally, when you're trying to draw people or trying to achieve a likeness, you always kind of need to adjust a little bit. Maybe make the ears smaller, or maybe bring the nose down, maybe make the lips bigger, or maybe make the eyebrows line like a little bit higher. But generally, it's a nice, good, basic guideline to get started of drawing people. Okay. Yeah, so is there any questions about head proportions? Nope. Okay, so then we're going to talk about body proportions. So typically, if you go online, a lot of people will say that the average human body is maybe like 7 to 8 heads. Typically, I like 7.5 heads. But for me, I think it's a lot easier for, especially for beginners, to try and imagine the human body as 8 heads, because 8 is an even number, and that's really easy to like kind of measure out, especially since it's A, you just need to know like halfway between here and here, and then you can subdivide areas. And that's like much easier than like going like, okay, what's half of 7.5 heads? Okay, where's 3.25? Yeah. So basically, so for the human body, we're gonna say it's 8 heads. Okay. So obviously the first head up there, that's the first head. Second, when you try to drop a head down, you get about, you basically get the chin and then like the bottom of the pectorals or breasts. And then bring one head down to the third head. You get the top of the bottom of the pecs to the navel button. And then from there, from the navel for the fourth head, you get the start of the leg joints or the bottom of the butt or crotch or whatever. And then as you guys can tell, about right here, about the bottom of the fourth head is about the midpoint. So if you need measurements, you can measure like from the bottom to the top of the head and then drag that down to make sure you get the legs about the right length. Okay. And then for the fifth head, you get the start of the leg joints to about somewhere around the thighs. It's not really a very easy measurement. And then from there, from the thighs, you get to the bottom of the knees. And then from the knees, you get the calves. And then from the calves, you get the bottom of the feet. Okay. Is there any questions about body proportions? No? Okay. So yeah. And then here's another slide, again, to reiterate with the face proportions. everyone is different. This is an image of all like the Olympic athletes, and as you can tell, all of them are different shapes and sizes, and people of different lengths. So people are of different heights. So some person, like this girl right here, she needs a little bit more head count, maybe like 9 heads or 10 heads. Well, maybe someone who's maybe much shorter, like this person right here, maybe needs to be 6 heads or something. Okay, but generally I think if you're just starting out to drawing people, I would say practicing with 8 heads is always a good start. And then from there you can kind of diverse and spread out more. Okay, so next part with proportions, there's another part of human anatomy is gesturing, and gesture is just basically posing the body to be a little bit more dynamic. Okay, so then for gesturing, there's a lot of different techniques and methods for it. So for one method, and the most common one, is the line of action. And so I think if any of y'all have taken like any animation classes or something, you probably are very familiar with this. So obviously a line of action is basically having kind of like an imaginary line that kind of like directs the overall motion or force that the body is doing. So as you can see, this one, the imaginary line is kind of this little curve right here, and the curve kind of signifies the direction or the flow of that figure, that pose that she has. And over here, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of examples from animation or animators' notes, as you can see for Mickey Mouse, from Lion King, Tom and Jerry over here, and more Disney stuff. So yeah, this is very common in animation, and mainly because having this line of action kind of makes your poses seem more dynamic, more alive. As you can see right here for the Tom and Jerry one, like without a line of action, kind of feels a bit stiff. Yeah, if you guys are drawing people wondering why is it so stiff looking, maybe it's just you don't have that kind of flow. And so when you have that line of action, you get a little bit more dynamic. You can feel that kind of force that Jerry's about. No, actually Tom. That's Tom, not Jerry. You can see the force that Tom's about to do with probably Jerry. Yeah, and you can see there's more examples here. Here's one right here where it's like you can see the tail and it goes up to the hand. Yeah, and then here's some more examples on some fan art that I found. Yeah, so you can see here's one with the Breath of the Wild. You see Link kind of has a nice little curve as he's going to go and fight the Minotaur, or the Lynel. Yeah, and then there's another one of Pokemon with Sir Farfetch. I don't know, I think he's adorable. So that's why I put in. You can see that little nice line curve right here. Right there, it's very nice and it's quite smooth. Kind of gives it a little bit more exciting, ready to take on people with its gigantic leak. Yeah, and then here's more examples of like real life bodies on what you can do. So yeah, so you can see from the first way, you maybe be like, nah, I can't really see the line of action, but you can always try and find it. Okay, so is there any questions on that? No. Okay, so next part, this part I couldn't really find a very official name. I just call it like zigzagging S curves or C curves, basically. So this one is basically, now that you have like kind of a line of action, we're gonna add a little bit more flow or flair. So it's basically saying like, so you know with the line of action is only one direction. Here's having like multiple directions, so kind of going in this nice zigzag formation, or an S kind of shape, or a C shape. And that's mainly meant to kind of give a nice little flow to your figure. So as you can see with here, it's just kind of a nice little flow or direction, kind of giving it a little bit more dynamic, you know? Okay, and then this kind of method can also be applied towards muscles as well. It's a little bit more, takes a little bit of practice to get it right, but you can apply this not only for bodies, but for muscles. So as you can see, these as you can see by these like outlines right here, muscle goes this way, goes this way, this way, this way, kind of. So it kind of gives like your muscles a little bit more, just a little bit more flow and a little bit more natural instead of like making it all seem very stiff. If you're getting why your characters look a bit stiff, maybe that's why. Yeah, and then here are more examples, and yes, it's censored. Yeah, so yeah, just you can't see the nipples, guys. Yeah, so you can see here's one with the body, here's another one with leg limbs having a nice motion, and then here's one again. I'm gonna like let y'all guys like look at that for a minute. Okay, and then here's another example of a real life figure, and then here's another one, another nice little art that I found. So as you can see, they have a nice little flow with their characters. As you can see, with this character, it's a little bit more dynamic, has a little flow. You can see, if you look at it, you can kind of feel that she's actually alive. She's coming towards you. Yeah. Okay, and then there's a lot of other rhythmic lines or kind of directions. One of this is like kind of, I guess one of my favorites, kind of having like a contrast between like one line that's kind of like smooth, straight, another one that's kind of like zigzagging. Is there like a black marker? There is a black marker. Yeah. Yeah, this one's mainly my favorite, as in you can draw. You guys see that? See that black? Nope.
Kind of. It's like half visible.
It's kind of dark.
How do you turn on the light switches?
You do it on the other board.
You know the terminal thing next to the computer, the small one?
Oh, okay.
You button that up.
Okay, yeah. So for this one's my favorite mainly because it's like really easy to have. So mainly because it's really easy to have a dynamic pose. So you have, say if a person's like standing there, you can have like the torso right on one side straight, and then you can have the other torso bend on the other side. You guys can see that. Yeah, it's just, to me, it's a nice, easy way to make it a standing pose seem more dynamic. Also, like, this part is also seen a lot when you see characters kind of like sitting down. You know, when you sit down, you have one part of your torso scrunched up and the other one stretched. So yeah, so that's why. So I like to use that one just because it's easier, or it's like it's pretty common. And then like the other one, that one's a little bit more advanced for like muscles. So you have one long line for like one limb that's going in this direction, and they have a little bit smaller like flows that kind of go into the line. That's like typically for like muscles or something. Okay. Okay, yeah. So that's done with gesturing. So now we're going to go for form and construction. Yeah. So when it comes to like form and construction, that's basically kind of like constructing the human body in kind of like a 3D kind of way, or just creating like different types of like 3D volumes or forms to help establish like the muscles and the inner parts of like the fat or muscles of the body. And you can, that doesn't make sense when we show more examples, and later on it'll fully come in. So for me, I like to think of like when you're trying to build like a nice human muscular figure or something, the basis for like a good form and construction is always on the ability to create nice 3D shapes. So as a nice way to practice is try practicing drawing a bunch of like rectangles or prisms or boxes to in order to help practice and establish that kind of feel. So as you can see, like here's a nice example of like of a dog, and you can see that this person has broken it down into like 3D volumes, so that way it makes it a little bit more easier to be able to draw it realistically. And also you can see that to here too as well for the human figure. So like for drawing like 3D, being able to draw like the 3D shapes, it's like good to be able to, because if you can draw it in 3D figures, it helps to establish like, kind of establish like, what's the best word? It kind of helps to like establish like the 3D form, or be able to like imagine it as like a more like, not as like a 2D figure, a flat figure, but as like a more real livable person. And also it's like, and also mainly for me, I think it makes it a lot more easier to start when you start adding muscles, because muscles are actually like 3D. Do you guys know that? Like your muscles are in a 3D world, and your body's a 3D environment, is a 3D figure. Yeah. So as you can see, like this person, he broke down the figure into 3D shapes, so that way it makes it a little bit easier to add muscles and know exactly where the muscles are and how do they bend and form. It also makes it kind of easier to add clothes too. Yeah. So for that, so I'm gonna give you guys some basic tips of like what to use to when you're trying to construct the human body. So for me, generally cylinders are always good for limbs like your arms and legs. As you can see here, there's a cylinder for the legs, cylinders for the arms, cylinders, cylinder, and cylinder. So as you can see, it's quite nice, it's quite easy to do. Okay, but if you don't like cylinders, boxes are still pretty good too. If you feel like drawing cylinders is not your cup of tea, you can always do boxes. And then for the torso, boxes are always good as well too. So as you can see, this person here draws a nice box to represent the pelvic area and the rib cage. And then also with boxes here, you can see this person is practicing, trying to create like a nice swoosh motion or twisting. If you twist your rib cage, but your pelvic bone stays in place, how does that work? So as you can see, there's that. Yeah, and then for like generally my tip for beginners, if you're trying to draw, I would not. It's always good to always try drawing the form and construction, but I wouldn't get too caught up in that. My tip for y'all would be try making sure you get the proportions down correctly, because for me, if you can't get the proportions right, then it will be much harder when you start making form and construction, because then you don't know exactly like how long you should make your cylinders or something, or even much better than that, it makes it harder later down the road, is because you don't know how long this muscle is or how short the pelvic or the deltoids are. Yeah, so I would just recommend focus a lot on just being able to draw proportions correctly and just having a nice gesture. And then from there, when you practice enough, you can start doing a little bit more, focusing a little bit more on construction. And I mainly say this mainly because when sometimes people go from like creating like kind of like gestures, lines, and they start trying to create, when they create a bunch of gestures and they start like blocking it in with shapes, the figure can suddenly become a little bit more stiff. Yeah, and that's just a little bit warning that as you go on to form, it can become a bit more stiff. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then so next part of this workshop is just is a lot of anatomy resources that I will have for y'all. Yeah. So like for anatomy resources, the best book I have recommendation is Andrew Loomis. That link right there, I think you can get the books, the PDFs of those books for free. So definitely use that. Yeah. Yeah, so like Andrew Loomis, his books are pretty old. I think they're from the 1930s, but they're still very good information. And I think the way he draws the human body is makes it quite easy for beginners and quite comprehensible. Yeah, and then next part, if for more gesture information, I think Forrest, the Dynamic Life Drawing for Animators. I feel like this is like the go-to book that all animators recommends. And I recommend it too. It goes very in depth of how to make a very dynamic figure. Yeah. Okay, and then other part, if you want stuff for like form and construction, this figure drawing by Michael Hampton is really good. I actually been using some of his pictures for the slides. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that, this is his drawings. And he really goes in depth of how to construct the human body and also goes over muscles. Yeah. And then this one, for more specific anatomy info, like if you have questions about bones and muscles, this book by Sarah is also really good. And then also one thing I really like about this book, it has some transparent pages. So you have like the bottom page is like the skin, like the human body, just regular. And then you have one transparent layer on top that has the muscles and another transparent layer on top that has the bones. So you can actually see how the muscles and bones all interact together to form one complete limb or body. So that's why I like it. Yeah, and then another one is the Atlas one by Stephen Rogers Peck, also pretty in depth. Okay. And then the next one is this one by Bern Hogan. I don't know, I can't pronounce his last name. But either way, this book is he goes very in depth of the human figure as well as like clothes. But it's very advanced and I would highly recommend just practicing first before trying to read it because it can be very overwhelming. But other than that, it's like really good. Yeah. And then just random topics. This one book about facial expressions I really like. It not only goes over like quick shorthands of how to make a very angry or sad face, but also goes in depth more about like the muscles and the anatomy of like why do sad faces have like a very frowning face? Like what are the muscles that cause it? Yeah, and then here's a bunch of YouTubers that I found. If you guys don't want to read, you want to watch videos, here's a bunch of YouTubers. Yeah, so like Progo, first two are very anatomy focused, and then the bottom four very more game arts. I have more general game art, so they go over topics like painting or digital. But they do talk about gesture and anatomy if you just like search in their like channels. Okay, and then and then other more resource practice. The first two links are an online gesturing kind of website. So basically it kind of like replicates an actual live drawing session with an actual human person instead you have pictures. So basically what you do is you go on and you decide to pick what type of models you want. Do you want male, female, nude, or cloth? and then and then you can have a timer. So basically that timer is, you can say, oh, I want 10 seconds to be able to draw this figure. So that way in 10 seconds, I want to be able to capture the entire pose or the gesture of it. Or I want to spend a long time, I want 20 minutes. So those two websites are very good for nice practicing to be able to build that figure drawing skills. And then the next part are just a bunch of like resources that I have that have like really great pictures of people in different poses. So you can also use those for your illustrations. Yeah, so these are great resources if you want to practice drawing different types of people in different poses. Okay, and then last resource I have is if you want to do if you don't want 2D pictures, you want an actual live human person, there's an organization called the Austin Visual Arts Association, and they actually do weekly live drawing sessions in between 38th Street between Speedway and Quad. And basically what happens is you can go in there and you and like some few artists, you guys can go and draw a model right in front of you. And yes, just for warning, the model is naked, so if that's uncomfortable for you, just a heads up. And also it is $6 in cash because they need to pay the model. But yeah, I have only gone about twice or 3 times, and it's very chill, honestly. It's very chill. They play music, and you can just come in whenever you want, and you can leave whenever you want, as long as you make sure you pay them. Oh yeah, and you can also use whatever media you want. So you can use if you want to paint, like do an actual oil painting, you can do that. If you want to do watercolor, if you want to do pen or pencil, or you want to bring a giant charcoal drawing, they will accept anything. Though I think for oil painting, they needs to be non-odors because of allergies. Yeah, and that's basically it. Yeah, so that was a large info dump. Yeah. Yeah, how much time do we have? Okay, so we have like 20 minutes left. So for this, since we have 20 minutes left, we can go over like something more in depth, like the body proportions or face proportions or something. Or would you guys like it to try and practice drawing something first? You know, like me go find a random stock photo and try practicing drawing that.
Stock photo.
Okay.
Let's go stock photo.
Thanks, Kevin.
Let's go on top of stock people.
Okay. Let's see. Here, let's do this. Okay, that's a pretty nice figure to start off. way too fast.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised you went through all the 60 slides already.
Usually make it 80.
I mean, if you feel like it, we can't just end it here.
I don't know.
And then
It's
it's
up
fine to end.
I don't know. It's up to people if they want to end it.
'Cause, yeah,
I don't know.
but yeah, if we, so it's the expectation that everyone's just like practicing right now.
I don't know if people are. Because I can't see their laptops.
Well, if you're gonna take a break like this, then it's a good opportunity just to walk around and be like, hey, what would you do it?
Sure. I can't tell if people are drawing or not.